Alright guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about how many deads you should take during KVK. So this is Lord Farquaad from Shrek with a very appropriate quote. Alright, let's get into it. So starting out, let's actually talk about power, right? So if you've been in any kingdom, you probably see there's this fixation on power. What's the top 300? The reason why is because it affects matchmaking. Okay, so it's actually a little bit more complicated than just your top 300 power, or some people even think it's more than that. But Lilith hasn't released the official way they do matchmaking, but people have kind of figured out that it probably starts out with taking your top 300 power, and then from there they'll look at the total KP, total deads, maybe even some other factors. And to simplify it, a lot of people just think, hey, if we can just drop the average power of the top 300, then we can get a better matchmaking. Where it really matters is if a kingdom gets into Imperium. So Imperium is the top 24 kingdoms by power. And when you're in Imperium status, when migration period opens, you can only migrate in, I think, like one player a month. You have to give the player a special ticket to migrate in. And if you have played the game any amount of time, you know players quit. You start accumulating dead weights in the kingdom. And if you don't have a reliable way to refresh and get fresh blood into the kingdom, it's going to die. So it's very, very important for a kingdom when they're fighting in KVK to drop Imperium, because if they don't drop Imperium, they literally can't get new migrants in. All right, so ideally for a kingdom that is an Imperium, when they're fighting, they'll drop. And when they drop out, they'll have a window to bring in migrants. And when they bring in migrants, it's okay for them to get into Imperium again, but then they need to take another KVK with good fighting where they can drop power again so they could continue the process. That's one of the reasons why the game is moving away from these super large kingdoms, because the Imperium line is getting lower. And if you have too many players, you literally just can't drop out of Imperium. And just over time, players are going to quit. Where you have dead weights that you can't get rid of, it starts becoming this like death spiral where you just can't refresh and bring in new blood, and a lot of times kingdom actually fall apart from that. Okay, so that's why it matters for a kingdom. Now for individual, if you look at the little picture here, this is my power and a breakdown of where it comes from. Okay, so the one that really matters as far as power and deads is actually the true power, right? Because the building power, you're not going to change. The technology power, you're not going to change. Usually the combination of building, technology, and commander for a T5 player, I notice it's usually somewhere around like 53 to 55 million. I guess technically you could be a little bit more diligent and smarter with how you invested in technology. It could be lower, but I just use 53 to 55 million. Like for me personally, I think I'm like 53.6 or something like that. And when you're killing off your troops, you can actually look at your personal power as a way to determine how many troops you should kill. So that's kind of the first idea there. All right, so let's actually get a little nerdy. I mean, I'm a nerd, so I'm not even making fun of nerds, right? But whenever you go into KVK, if it's any kind of organized kingdom, there's going to be kingdom requirements, right? So for 68, this is the last one I could find. It could have been updated. If you're around 80 million power, they expect you to lose 17 million of that power. Okay, and then if it's all T5, it's about 1.7 million. If it's all T4, it'll become about 4.2 million. I'm rounding a little bit. It could be a little bit off, but it's going to be in that range. Now, it's not just like, oh, okay, I should be at 63 million at the end of KVK, because you have to remember, whenever they take the scan, maybe it's before the training, maybe it's after they do training before fighting, you're still going to be training up troops during KVK. Once you're in Season of Conquest, there's these things called bastions. They look like little castles, right? We're a little castle tower, and every day you'll get 15 chances. And one of the most lucrative quests you could get from there in terms of crystals is a troop training quest, right? So as you're training all these troops, your power is going to go up during KVK until you have fighting. Okay, so for example, for me, I started last KVK at a little under 80. And I think the highest I actually got to during KVK was about 85. And then towards the end of KVK, when I dropped down to like 69 million power, right? So it's not just you lose 17 million powers from the 80. There's other factors involved, but that's just like a general guide. Now, Most kingdoms, or a lot of kingdoms, use something called dragon kill points. It's even nerdier. I think it originated from World of Warcraft, where they're determining okay, like I guess how much you heal versus if you're a tanker versus you're doing DPS. They have some kind of formula or a system to determine who gets to loot. And here, or in Rise of Kingdoms, DKP, for the most part, from what I've seen, is how much KP plus how many deads you get. And a lot of kingdoms will include the farm deads that you get. Sometimes they put in some other factors, but in general, it's KP and deads. And they kind of put that together in some kind of formula to determine how much DKP you have. And that's a way where maybe you don't get as many deads, right? Maybe you don't drop 17 million power, but you get an absurd amount of kills. Well, you're still contributing to the kingdom. They're going to accept that. Okay. Ultimately, when it comes to deads, context matters, because you can take a rally, you can get a bunch of deads, right? You can, in the first zone when there's fighting, so zone 5, you could kill a bunch of your troops. That was a terrible time to kill your troops, because if you still have resources and speeds and you kill off all your troops and you can't open field, you're actually hurting the kingdom more than you're helping, even though you quote unquote met your requirements. Okay, so the context of deads really matters. It's very overrated, and if you watch any highlight video or you've just seen any players, you can literally meet your dead requirements in 10 to 15 minutes, unless you're just some monster whale, right? You could just keep filling a garrison or a rally and just keep killing off your troops, and you're going to meet your dead requirements in like 15 minutes. If no one else is filling it, you're the only one doing it. So in general, the bigger a player is, the less they're gonna feel the deads, because you only need up to a certain point to field your troops, right? Anything above that is just troops in reserve that are really there to be killed. So if you're closer to the line where if you kill X amount of troops, now you can't fill your marches, you shouldn't be counted on to contribute as much deads as a much bigger player that has so many extra troops to burn that they have those extra troops to contribute to the kingdom for deads. Okay, so the context really does matter. And in general, if you're gonna argue between being able to open field or contributing to deads, your open field contribution is going to be way more important, unless it's some like single isolated case where you need to get the deads to help your kingdom get this objective to win. But that's just like a very, very rare thing. Usually like KVKs happen over time when you slowly drain out the enemy. They either are out of resources, speeds, troops, or morale, and then they eventually kind of give up and get pushed out, right? It's not just like one single thing that matters the most. Okay, so what should you do as far as training? Okay, so during the off season, for most players, you just train team 4, because that way you can still get a lot of troops. I think it's about like 40% of the resources and speeds already, and you don't gain a lot of power from that, right? And then during KVK, you can upgrade from T4 to T5. I talked about those Bastion quests. That's a good time to do it. And ideally, you're only using your training speed ups and not your universal speed ups. If you have a lot of universals, you want to get into it, that's fine. Usually, that's for bigger players. But for the most part, like even for me, right? I can actually train more than enough troops just using my training speed ups, because you still accumulate it even during KVK, and that will get you to about the power you normally want to get to. So for me, I usually carry about around 80 million power, and then again, as I talked about for the last KVK, during KVK, it got up to 85 just from training, and then you just kill them off. All right, ultimately, it's going to be a balancing act. People probably don't realize this, but when you're training troops, it's just going to cost more speeds and resources than when you're healing them. Okay, now what's cool with the KVK system is at the end of the KVK, you get half your troops back. So that cost actually is going to be in half, because whatever you kill, you actually get half back. But the problem is when you kill it off, you can't use it during KVK. So it's always going to be this like balancing act between, okay, do I have enough extra troops for to get deads versus like, do I save enough where I'll have resources and speeds to open field? And for every player, you kind of have to feel that out for yourself. That's why there's not a hard like number, like 80 million power, you do this, because it could even be like, are you using all T5s? Are you using half T4, half T5s, right? it depends. How efficient are you in the field and trading? Like, so, but it is a balancing act. Now, here is what you need to know, okay? How many troops should you kill? Ideally, you kill up to threshold 1. So let's just say I was at 85 million power. Threshold 1 for me was about 75 million power. For the most part, last KVK, I used half T4 and half T5. And if I filled up my hospital, this is with full tech, so max tech, crystal tech, I still had about 75 million power left. Okay, so if anything above that, I don't need it, because I'm not gonna not heal my hospital when it's full. When it's full, I just heal it again, and I can actually carry 75 million power for 6 marches and keep up my full open field capability, right? So if I was at 85 million, I dropped down to 75 million, it was all T5s, that would be 1 million troops, right? 1 million T5 troops. Okay, that's ideally where you could keep it for most of KVK, because it's not inconvenient, right? It's just extra troops that you're not going to miss anyways. Threshold 2 is a little inconvenient, but it's still fine. That's where now you have enough to field 6 marches for me, right? But anytime I take any 7 wounds, I need to go heal the hospital. Now, so basically I need to heal a lot more often. It's inconvenient because now almost every time you have a fight, you have to heal the hospital so you can field 6 marches again, but you can make it work. The problem with that is if you do it too often, you get, I think, 1,000 helps a day as a limit. Like, you can actually eat away at that 1,000 helps a lot quicker, and then you have to potentially burn a lot more speeds. But honestly, usually this will happen more towards the end of KVK, where you know, you're just putting it out there to try to win, right? Like, not everyone's going to be able to be at threshold 1 to be comfortable. So then from there, I could drop about 5 million more power and still keep my open fielding, right? 6 marches. And that was about where I got to last KVK. So I started at 80 million, I got to 85 million, and I dropped down to about 69 million. And last KVK, I got like 2.1 million deads. Most of them was T5, right? So that kind of gives you a sense, right? And that's without really putting too much into training troops. It's just naturally training in the off-season T4, upgraded T5. I think most players, to do that, it's not that big of a burden on them. Okay, now threshold 3, it's only if needed, okay? Because below threshold 2, now I'm actually taken away from my open field capabilities, which is hurting the kingdom. Okay, so ideally you get down to threshold 2. You let other players that haven't hit threshold 2 yet get down to threshold 2. The bigger whales, the krakens, should be killing even more troops because they can handle more of it. And then if you really need to, ideally you're out of either resources or speed, so now you can't heal your hospital anymore. So basically you can't field those troops anymore, and then you start zeroing, quote unquote, zeroing yourself, where you kill more troops beyond like what you normally would prefer to field, right? So let's just say threshold 2 was 70 million power for me. Technically I could drop down to like 53 million power, right? Because I could kill off all my troops if I needed. And I like to equate this to almost like investing in cryptocurrency or stock. We always look at the price of a stock or crypto. We're like, oh, look at the all-time high. It's this. But nobody actually gets out at the all-time high, right? Because you're not gonna be like, oh, this is it. Usually when it's hitting a high, there's euphoria. You know, you don't want to miss out. The best strategy is actually to level out, right? And when you level out, you're always gonna leave some in just in case it goes even higher. So it's very, very uncommon that you're going to get to a point where you can use up all your resources or speeds perfectly when you should, and then you zero yourself and then the KVK is over and you timed it perfectly, right? Sometimes you might have paced a little bit too fast or a little bit too inefficient with burning your resources, and there was still more open field fighting that needed to be done on the for your kingdom, and you can't contribute there anymore, right? But if you have to, you should not zero yourself. You should not go beyond threshold 2 into threshold 3 until you're out of resources or speeds, just because you could still contribute to your kingdom open fielding. And if you're killing your troops a lot faster, you're hurting more than you're helping, even though the dead numbers look good. Okay, so That's like the very complex, but I think also simple way of answering how many troops should you kill. Threshold 1, Threshold 2, Threshold 3. Okay. If you got any value from this and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, or at the very least like, because it really helps out with the algorithms and also monetization. And if you have any questions or comments, leave it in the comments section. I do have like a second channel for mentoring. It's the link, it will be in the description. If you go there, you could also send me an email. I do want to put together like questions to answer, to do it like a mailbag weekly. This video actually came from a person asking me a question about it, and I thought it required more than just like a mailbag, so I made it into a video. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.